welcome back to Onyx Recaps. Today we will talk about the movie Like Mike, released in 2002. The movie is about a boy named Calvin who lives in an orphanage with his friends Murph and Reg. They love to play basketball in the front yard of their orphanage. One day, while they were playing, a group of bullies led by Ox came and challenged Calvin to a match for his basketball jersey. Calvin wanted to accept the challenge because he was inspired by his favorite basketball players. But unfortunately, Ox won easily because he was much taller than Calvin. Ox took Calvin's jersey and ripped it apart to annoy him. The orphanage director, Stan Biddleman, often makes the kids sell candy to raise money. The orphans need money, so they sell candy. They go to an NBA game and sell candy there too. Calvin meets the coach and he offers him money, but Calvin doesn't take it because he's not sure it's for charity. The coach gives him tickets to the next game instead. The next day, some people come to the orphanage looking to adopt, but they only want younger kids. Later, they get a box of clothes from a thrift store and Calvin finds a pair of shoes. Calvin tries on a pair of shoes that belong to a famous basketball player, Michael B. Jordan. His bully, the Ox, takes the shoes and throws them up in the air. They get stuck on a power cable during a thunderstorm. Calvin and his friends go out in the heavy rain to retrieve the shoes. Calvin climbs a tree to reach the shoes, but lightning strikes and he falls to the ground with the shoes. Luckily, he isn't seriously hurt. The next day, the kids go to sell candy at the arena again and get the tickets promised by the coach. They watch the game between the Los Angeles Knights and the Minnesota Timberwolves. During halftime, the team's star player Tracy Reynolds and a coach approach Calvin, impressed with his skills. At a basketball game, there was a halftime show where a player named Tracy Reynolds would play one-on-one against someone from the audience. Calvin's ticket number got picked for the contest, but Ox and his friends were jealous and tried to take the ticket. Calvin managed to trick Ox and run to the front with his ticket. Tracy let Calvin score the first round since he was just a kid and wanted to get the audience more involved. Calvin wins the one-on-one contest with Tracy Reynolds at the halftime show. The next day, the coaches of the Knights basketball team come to meet the orphanage director and ask him to let Calvin play for the team for one day. At first, the director is not sure, but then he agrees when they offer him money. Calvin's friends are very happy for him. Calvin's friend Ox is angry because he lost to Calvin even after he got the magic shoes. The kids believe that the shoes are magical and keep it a secret from everyone, but Ox overhears them. The next day, Calvin goes to the Knights' changing room, which annoys Tracy. His teammates warn him that Calvin is coming to challenge him. Calvin is given a Knights jersey and a new pair of shoes that he has to wear. Calvin joins the Los Angeles Knights team, but only as a publicity stunt. The coach doesn't care about his attire or how he plays. During his first game, he doesn't get to play until the second half when the team is about to lose. Although nervous, the coach allows Calvin to play, but he is not wearing his lucky shoes. Calvin gets too nervous and calls a timeout, running to the locker room to change into his old shoes, much to everyone's annoyance. After helping his team win the game, Calvin signs a contract to play with them for the rest of the tournament. He is packing to leave the orphanage for the tournament when Biddleman, his former guardian, confronts him. Biddleman wants to continue being his guardian for financial gain and warns Calvin to be careful of people who want to adopt him. The coach assigns Calvin and Tracy to the same room on their flight. Calvin is happy to share a room with his favorite player, but Tracy is not as excited. They have a curfew, but Tracy plans to break it for a date. Before leaving, he teaches Calvin how to use room service. Calvin enjoys the freedom to eat whatever he wants. When Tracy returns with his date, he finds the room a mess with half-eaten food. He had hoped to spend the night with his date, but instead, they end up taking care of Calvin, who is sick. The next night, Tracy and Calvin have trouble sleeping because of Calvin's snoring. The following day, they have an important game to play, but Tracy is feeling tired. During the game, Calvin inadvertently tells the coach that they stayed up late the night before. The coach warns Tracy that he will be suspended if he misses curfew again. Despite this, Calvin continues to play with the team and helps them win all their games. The opponents are surprised by Calvin's skills and do not know what to expect when playing against him. Calvin becomes very popular and attends many interviews and earns a lot of money. He uses the money to buy presents for everyone at the orphanage. He wins the NBA slam dunk competition and becomes a rising basketball star. One night, while talking to Murph about his new life, Ox hears them and becomes jealous. He tries to take Calvin's shoes away and a fight breaks out. Biddleman intervenes and scolds Ox for hitting his friends. Biddleman, who makes money from Calvin, wants to protect him from harm. Tracy buys sleeping pills and allergy medicines to help him sleep better before the next day's match. During the ride, Calvin asks about Tracy's parents and learns that he has a father he doesn't talk to. The cashier gives Tracy a sleeping pill instead of an allergy pill, causing him to fall asleep before driving back to the hotel. Calvin takes the wheel to avoid missing curfew and hitting several things on the way. The next day, Calvin is suspended for joyriding, and Tracy feels guilty that Calvin got punished for his mistake. Later on the flight back home, Tracy thanks Calvin for taking the blame to save him. Tracy has started to like Calvin after spending time with him. When Calvin returns to the orphanage, several people come in wanting to adopt him. Murph gets jealous because he wants the adults to want him too. Biddleman doesn't want Calvin to get adopted, so he arranges a meeting with only the worst parents. Calvin doesn't like any of the adults he meets and decides to stay at the orphanage. That weekend, Calvin visits Tracy at his house without telling him. Calvin is amazed by the size of Tracy's mansion and is asked why he is there. At Tracy's mansion, Calvin shares his problems with Tracy, Murph's jealousy, Calvin's wish for good parents, and an upcoming geometry test. Tracy suggests inviting Murph over and teaching him geometry in a fun way. They start throwing paint at each other and Murph joins in. The next day, Calvin and his friends discuss the difficulty of finding good parents. Calvin shares with them about Tracy's estranged relationship with his father, and his friends suggest Calvin helps them reconcile. The next day, the Knights have a match against their biggest opponents, the Toronto Raptors, but Calvin and Tracy are still not on good terms. As a result, they lose the match, and the coach scolds the team for their poor performance in such an important game. A couple visits the orphanage and wants to adopt Calvin, but he's not sure about them. Middleman convinces him to give them a chance and he gets new shoes to wear to impress them. Before leaving, Calvin gives his lucky shoes to Murph for safekeeping. Murph tries to wear the shoes and play basketball like Calvin, but he fails. He realizes that the shoes don't fit him and talks to a picture of his mother. Ox and his friends threaten Murph to tell them about the shoes, but he refuses. They take Murph to Biddleman after he refuses to tell them about Calvin's lucky shoes. Biddleman burns the only picture Murph has of his mother to threaten him. Murph eventually tells them where the shoes are hidden. Before the game, Calvin goes to dinner with a couple who wants to adopt him, but he doesn't feel like he fits in with them. Biddleman bets $100,000 against the Knights in the next game since he believes Calvin will play poorly without his lucky shoes. Meanwhile, Tracy reconciles with his father and misses Calvin. Just before the game, Murph calls Calvin and tells him that Biddleman has hidden his lucky shoes. Calvin rushes back to the orphanage to retrieve them, and with the help of the other kids, he ties up Biddleman and demands the shoes. Ox initially tries to help Biddleman but changes his mind when Biddleman insults him. Finally, Biddleman gives Calvin back his lucky shoes. Calvin and his friends ride their scooters to the arena for the big game. Biddleman, who Calvin tied up earlier, manages to free himself and orders his associates to stop Calvin from getting to the game. However, the kids are able to stall them and Calvin makes it to the arena. But Biddleman tries to stop Calvin by standing in front of him. Calvin hits him with his scooter and manages to get to the game. However, when he starts playing, his team is behind by a lot. Calvin helps his team catch up with the opponent's score, but he gets tackled during the game and his lucky shoes get destroyed. Calvin thinks he needs his lucky shoes to play well, but they get destroyed during a game. Tracy tells Calvin that the shoes didn't give him his talent, it was already inside him. Calvin keeps playing and helps his team win. He decides he doesn't want to continue playing basketball professionally and returns to the orphanage, which has changed since Biddleman left. Tracy asks Calvin if he wants to be his son and live with him. Calvin agrees, but only if his friend Murph can come too. They both get adopted by Tracy and move into a new room. Their friend Reg also gets adopted by a different family. The video ends with Calvin and Murph playfully fighting with Tracy. If you like the video, you can subscribe for more content like this and hit the like button to help out. Leave a comment if you want them to recap your favorite movie. Take care until next time. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more recaps.